I thought landing my dream job would finally make my family proud, but I didn't know my stepsister was already planning how to destroy it from the inside. My name is Elena Brooks. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how my stepsister tried to get me fired from the career I worked my entire life for. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. I still remember the exact moment I got the offer letter. I was sitting in my car outside a coffee shop in downtown Chicago, hands shaking as I refreshed my email for the 5th time. When the subject line finally appeared, offer of employment, creative strategy manager, I burst into tears so hard I scared the guy walking past my window. This wasn't just a job. It was a job. A 6-figure position at a national branding firm. Health insurance that actually covered therapy, a team I admired. A chance to finally prove that I wasn't just getting by, but actually building something real. I called my mom first. She cried. I called my dad. He said he was proud of me in that quiet, serious way that meant everything. And then, against my better judgment, I told my stepsister Marissa. She was silent for a moment. Too silent. Well, she finally said, dragging the word out, must be nice. That should have been my first warning. Marissa and I grew up in the same house but lived in completely different worlds. Her mom married my dad when I was 11. From the outside, we looked like a blended family success story. Inside, there was an invisible scoreboard I never agreed to play on. Marissa had always been the almost finished college, almost promoted, almost stable. Every time something went wrong in her life, there was always a reason: bad boss, jealous coworker, unfair system. And every time something went right in mine, there was always an explanation too: luck, timing, help, never hard work. I moved into my new office building on my first day feeling like I finally belonged somewhere. Glass walls, open desks, quiet confidence in the air. I worked late, asked questions, stayed humble. Within 3 months, my director was trusting me with client-facing projects. I didn't talk about work at family dinners, but Marissa always asked anyway. So what do you actually do all day? She'd say, smiling too tightly. When I explained, she'd nod slowly. Huh, sounds stressful. You sure you can handle that kind of pressure? I brushed it off. I always did. The first crack appeared in my 4th month. I was called into HR unexpectedly, no warning, no email. Just a Slack message. Can you stop by HR at 2? I assumed paperwork. Instead, I walked into a room with 2 HR managers and my department head. Their faces were polite but distant. Elena, one of them said, folding her hands, we've received some concerns regarding your conduct. My stomach dropped. They slid a printed document across the table. Anonymous complaint. Allegations that I was taking credit for other people's work, that I was difficult to collaborate with, that I had misrepresented my experience. None of it was true. I defended myself calmly, backed everything up with project records and emails. My director listened closely. HR nodded. Eventually they said they'd look into it further. I left shaken but confident it would blow over. 2 weeks later, another complaint came in. Then another. Each one more specific, more personal. Things only someone close to me would know, phrases I'd used. Mistakes from years ago twisted into current accusations. Someone was watching me. Someone was trying to build a case. The final blow came when my director pulled me aside and said words I'll never forget. Off the record, do you have any family who works in a related field? I froze. Why? He hesitated. Because whoever's filing these knows too much. This feels intentional. That night, I sat on my apartment floor staring at my phone, at unread messages from Marissa, at photos she'd posted congratulating herself for new beginnings and manifesting abundance. And then it clicked. 2 months earlier, Marissa had asked if my company was hiring. I told her no but mentioned the firm name casually. She smiled and said, "Good to know. I opened my laptop and searched her LinkedIn. Her headline had changed. Marketing consultant, brand ethics, and corporate accountability. My heart pounded, because suddenly everything made sense. And I realized something terrifying. Marissa wasn't just jealous. She was actively trying to erase me, and she thought I'd never connect the dots. But she was wrong, because what she didn't know was I had receipts. And I was done protecting her. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of the HR meeting, every word written on those anonymous complaints. The tone had been polite, professional, but underneath it was something colder. Suspicion. Doubt. The kind that sticks even when no one says it out loud. By the time the sun came up, fear had burned itself out and left something sharper behind. Determination. I called in sick and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, a notebook beside it, and a mug of coffee that went cold without me noticing. If someone was trying to rewrite who I was at work, I needed to understand exactly how they were doing it. And if my stepsister was involved, I needed proof that didn't rely on feelings or family history. Just facts. I started with LinkedIn. Marissa's profile looked different from the last time I checked. Her headline was bolder, full of buzzwords about ethics, accountability, and corporate culture. Her experience section was vague, almost intentionally so, like it was designed to sound impressive without saying anything verifiable. No clients, no examples. Just confident language. Then I noticed her recent connections. My stomach tightened as I scrolled. Several of them worked at my company. Not executives or recruiters, but people close to me. Junior team members, an intern. Someone I collaborated with on a client pitch only weeks earlier. That wasn't coincidence. That was access. I kept digging and found a post she'd shared a few weeks earlier about toxic overachievers in creative environments. Her caption talked about how ambition can hide harmful behavior and how anonymous reporting protects people who are afraid to speak up. The timing lined up perfectly with the first complaint against me. It felt like standing in a room and realizing the walls were slowly closing in. I opened my work systems next, pulling up every project I'd touched. I reviewed comment histories, version logs, feedback threads. Everything told the same story. Clear collaboration. Shared credit. Transparency. The accusations didn't match reality, which meant they had to be coming from somewhere else. Around midday, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom asking why I'd been so quiet lately. She mentioned Marissa had expressed concern about me. That alone made my jaw tighten. Even now, Marissa was managing the story, positioning herself as worried and reasonable while I stayed silent. I replied that I was busy with work and put my phone face down. Then I did something I'd hesitated to do all morning. I messaged Nina, the intern I'd mentored during my second month at the company. I asked, as neutrally as I could, whether anyone had reached out to her asking questions about me or the team. Her response took a few minutes, and when it came, my pulse spiked. She said someone had contacted her on LinkedIn claiming to be a consultant researching workplace culture. The name attached to the message was Marissa Brooks. I asked what she'd been asked. Nina needed the questions made her uncomfortable. Marissa had asked whether I ever took credit for ideas, whether I intimidated others, whether people felt pressured working with me. Nina said she'd answered honestly, but the questions kept being reframed, nudged in a more negative direction. It wasn't a conversation. It was a funnel. I asked if she still had the messages. She sent screenshots. Reading them made my hands shake. Marissa never outright accused me of anything. She didn't need to. She used suggestion instead of statements, implication instead of lies. She framed everything as concern, as care, as professionalism. It was manipulation dressed up as ethics. By late afternoon, I had similar screenshots from two more coworkers. Both admitted they felt uneasy but hadn't wanted to cause trouble. Both confirmed Marissa had presented herself as an independent consultant and steered the conversation toward me. That evening, HR emailed again, asking for a follow-up meeting the next morning. I sat on my couch staring at the message, feeling the weight of what could have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts. But the fear was different now. It wasn't paralyzing. It was focused. The next morning, I walked into the HR office with a folder under my arm. When they mentioned the volume of complaints again, I listened calmly, then told them I discovered the source. I showed them the screenshots, the dates, the patterns. I explained who Marissa was and how she contacted my coworkers under false pretenses. The room shifted. My director's expression hardened, not toward me, but toward the situation. HR asked careful questions, clarifying details. When they finished reading, one of them said quietly that this reframed everything. I told them I wasn't asking for favoritism, only for the same scrutiny to be applied to the source of the complaints as had been applied to me. When the meeting ended, I wasn't dismissed or warned. I was thanked. That night, Marissa called me. I didn't answer. She followed up with a text asking why people from my job were contacting her and whether I said something. For the first time, she sounded uncertain. I replied that we needed to talk in person. She didn't respond. And in that silence, I understood something clearly. She had expected me to panic, to shrink, to quietly accept whatever damage she caused. She hadn't planned for me to connect the dots. She hadn't planned for evidence. And she definitely hadn't planned for accountability. Marissa agreed to meet 2 days later. She suggested a cafe near our parents' house in Naperville, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and inspirational quotes painted above the espresso machine. It was neutral territory, public enough to keep things polite, familiar enough to feel like home. A strategic choice. She'd always been good at controlling the setting. I arrived early and chose a table near the window. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, like my body already knew this conversation would cost me something. I reminded myself why I was there, not to yell, not to win. To tell the truth clearly and without apology. Marissa walked in exactly on time, dressed effortlessly as always. Cream blazer, gold hoops, confident stride. From a distance, she looked untouched by the chaos she caused. When she spotted me, she smiled cautiously, the way people do when they're unsure who holds the power. "Hey," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You sounded serious." "I am," I replied. She ordered a latte like nothing was wrong, chatting briefly with the barista. That alone made my stomach twist. This wasn't a misunderstanding to her. It was damage control. Once we were alone again, she leaned forward slightly. "So, what's going on?" "People from your company started asking me weird questions." I looked at her carefully. "That's interesting," I said. "Because I was going to ask why you were contacting my coworkers pretending to be a consultant." Her expression didn't change right away, but something flickered behind her eyes. Calculation. "I didn't pretend," she said calmly. "I am consulting, informally." "You told them you were researching workplace culture," I said. And then asked leading questions about me specifically. She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "Elena, I never filed a complaint. I never told anyone to report you. I just asked questions." "That's not better," I said quietly. "You know that, right?" She crossed her arms. "I was concerned. You've always been intense. I thought maybe your company should know what working with you is really like." There it was. The justification she rehearsed. "What you were really doing," I said, keeping my voice even, "was building a narrative. You reached out to junior employees who might feel pressure to agree with you. You reframed their neutral answers until they sounded negative. Then you let HR receive anonymous complaints that all echo the same language." She shook her head. "You're paranoid." I slid my phone across the table and unlocked it. On the screen were the screenshots Nina had sent me, Marissa's name. Her profile picture, her words. She went very still. "You shouldn't have those," she said. "That's your takeaway." I asked. Her jaw tightened. "You went behind my back." "You went behind mine first," I replied. "At my job." The one you know I worked years for. People at nearby tables laughed, oblivious. The normalcy of the cafe felt surreal. Marissa leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing. You always think you deserve everything. The good grades, the promotions, the praise. Do you know how it feels watching you succeed while I'm still trying to figure things out? Yes, I said. Because you've spent our entire relationship reminding me. Her voice rose slightly. You think I planned this out like some villain? I was venting. I was exploring options. You made me feel small at my own wedding, and suddenly everyone sees you as the competent one again. I took a breath. I didn't make you feel small. I refused to pretend you were perfect. That's the same thing, she snapped. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the HR room. The quiet doubt in my director's eyes. The way my reputation had been put on trial without my knowledge. You risk my livelihood, I said. You don't get to call that venting. She looked away, jaw clenched. I didn't think it would go that far. But it did, I said. And here's what's going to happen next. That got her attention. My company is investigating the source of the complaints, I continued. They have the screenshots. They know you misrepresented yourself. They're considering legal action for interference. Her face drained of color. They can't do that. They can, I said. And whether they do or not isn't up to me. Her confidence cracked for the first time. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm giving you one chance to take responsibility, I said. You can admit what you did, in writing. And you can stop. She laughed nervously. And if I don't? I met her eyes. Then I stop protecting you. The words hung between us, heavy and irreversible. You wouldn't, she said. We're family. I thought about every time that word had been used to excuse her behavior. To silence me. To shift blame. I already have, I said. I just didn't tell you yet. Silence stretched. The espresso machine hissed behind the counter. Outside, someone walked past with a dog tugging at its leash. Marissa swallowed. You're really going to do this? I didn't start this, I replied. I'm just finishing it. She stood abruptly, grabbing her bag. You've changed, she said, voice tight. You're cold. No, I said. I'm clear. She stared at me for a long moment, like she was seeing me for the first time. Then she turned and walked out, the bell above the door chiming softly behind her. I sat there for a few minutes after she left, letting the adrenaline drain from my body. My hands trembled slightly, but underneath the fear was something steadier. Relief. That evening, my director called me. We've concluded the investigation, he said. Your record is clean. The complaints are being formally dismissed. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. There's more, he added. We're escalating this to our legal team. What happened to you wasn't just inappropriate. It was targeted. When the call ended, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights glowing outside my window. For the first time since this started, I allowed myself to feel proud. Marissa had tried to control the story, but she'd underestimated one thing. I wasn't willing to disappear quietly anymore. And in the next part, she will learn what happens when manipulation meets consequences. 2 days after my meeting with Marissa, HR sent out a company-wide reminder about third-party interference and ethical reporting standards. No names were mentioned, but the message was clear. Someone had crossed a line, and the company had noticed. I forwarded the email to Marissa without a comment. She didn't respond. Those words mattered more than she knew. Still, the emotional cost lingered. Every Slack notification made my chest tighten for a second. Every email from HR made me brace instinctively, even though I knew the investigation was over. Betrayal doesn't disappear just because it's exposed. It leaves residue. My parents called that weekend. For a moment, she looked genuinely lost. Smaller than I'd ever seen her. I didn't think they listened to me, she said quietly. I thought you were untouchable. I shook my head. No one is. That's why what you did was dangerous. Silence settled between us. The parking lot lights flickered on. I can't fix this, can I? She asked. Not the way you want, I said. But you can stop making it worse. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful exactly, but steady. The kind of calm that comes after you stop fighting a battle that was never fair to begin with. At work, the storm had passed. The legal team handled what needed to be handled. I wasn't involved beyond providing documentation, and I was grateful for that. I didn't want revenge. I wanted closure. My job didn't just survive, it grew. I was officially promoted into the role my director had been testing me for, with a salary increase and long-term client ownership. When the offer came through, I sat at my desk staring at the screen, heart pounding, and let myself feel it fully. Pride, relief, validation, not because I'd beaten Marisa, but because I hadn't let her erase me. That night, I called my parents. I told them about the promotion. Mom congratulated me warmly. Greg said he knew I'd do great things. There was a pause after the pleasantries, the familiar unspoken tension hovering between us. She's having a hard time, Mom said finally. This situation has really affected Marisa. I had expected that. It affected me too, I replied calmly. I know, she said, softer now. I just wish you two could find your way back. I leaned back against my kitchen counter, staring at the city lights outside my window. Maybe someday, I said. But not at the cost of my safety or my career. She didn't argue. That, more than anything, told me something had shifted. Marisa and I didn't speak for months after that. No dramatic fallout. No reconciliation montage. Just silence. And for the first time, it wasn't suffocating. It was spacious. I filled that space with my life. I threw myself into projects I loved. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the chaos. I started therapy myself, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand why I tolerated being minimized for so long. One afternoon, my therapist asked me a simple question that stopped me cold. When did you learn that protecting yourself was the same as being selfish? I didn't have an answer. Just a lump in my throat. Months later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. Handwritten address. No return label. I knew who it was from before I opened it. Inside was a letter from Marisa, not an email, not a text. Real paper. Real ink. She didn't excuse herself this time. She didn't blame stress or insecurity or misunderstanding. She wrote about how losing control of the narrative at my job had forced her to confront patterns she'd always avoided. About how she'd equated my success with her failure instead of seeing it as separate. About how she'd confused love with competition. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She ended the letter with one sentence. I'm learning that accountability doesn't end relationships, avoiding it does. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to respond. I let it sit. A week later, I wrote back. I told her I appreciated the honesty. I told her I wasn't ready to rebuild a relationship, but I wished her well in her work and growth. I told her that if we ever tried again, it would have to be rooted in respect, not rivalry. I didn't promise more than I could give. And that was enough. A year after everything happened, I stood in my office late one evening, looking out at the skyline, thinking about how close I'd come to losing this view. Not just the job, but the sense of self I'd fought so hard to build. Marisa's scheme had been real. The threat had been real, but so had my response. I didn't win by destroying her. I won by refusing to disappear. Family doesn't get a free pass to sabotage your future. Love doesn't require silence. And success doesn't belong only to the person who demands it the loudest. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is expose the truth, even when it comes from someone you once protected, because your dream is worth defending. And so are you.